At a secret location, 6 strangers sit at one table to enjoy a 3-course meal. Given topics and questions to discuss, there is no space at this table to be politically correct. Who will choke on their food or who will swallow their words? This is Don't Talk with Your Mouth Full.
Are we all just sitting on our pictures?
No,
Yeah.
I took mine off.
Yeah.
I will never sit on my own face.
No,
Let's
exactly.
pretend I did.
Our dinner guests had the menu. Now let's see what's for starters.
So, our first starter. Okay, awkward nails, bear with me. Right. Dun 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 dun. So, our starters are lamb ribs, mac and cheese, and salad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds nice. That's a big starter.
I know.
That's a big starter.
Wow. It is, isn't it? What is the question then? Oh dear.
I haven't had mac and cheese in forever.
Now that our dinner guests are tucking in, I think it's time for the first topic.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, new analysis of census figures shows that the number of people in England and Wales living with or married to someone from another group jumped 35% to 2.3 million in the 10 years. During that period, the number of people described on census forms as mixed or multiple ethnicity almost doubled from just 580,000 in 2001 to 1.2 million in 2011, making it by far the fastest growing category. The question, is the rise of interracial relationships a sign that racism is gone? What do we think?
It's never going to be finished.
Okay.
Because we've had our first black president, does that mean racism is gone?
No.
No, not
In
at all.
America, that is.
No. It's
People
always
like to
there.
hate someone.
It's always there.
Absolutely. It's the way of the world, isn't it?
Need a target.
Yeah.
How many do you
Definitely.
need, though? How many black presidents do you need until you start saying racism is, starting to die out?
The first black president, they bring in the most racist president.
Ever.
Yeah,
Exactly. Spoken
Exactly.
Arguably, yeah.
What was all that
So,
about?
exactly.
But then how do we link presidents to interracial couples? Like, if we can't even talk about a president being in that position to kill racism, couples?
Race, in terms of race relationships, I mean,
But then they get discriminated against as a couple in themselves.
How
Because
so?
people from both sides look at them as what are you doing with that person of that ethnic background as opposed to being with yourself, white with white, black with black.
Who do you blame for that?
You,
I haven't
your
quite
fault.
become the antagonist yet, but if you so choose.
It's all your fault.
You
You
wanted
blame
to.
someone.
exactly.
Exactly. And it's you.
yeah. I mean,
Things easier.
like having a relationship with someone isn't about like if like the societal views of like race or like that. I feel like it's more about exposure, whereas before back in those times, there was less people of color around. So could you say it's more exposure than it is race relationships being broke, like
I'm
becoming
with you on that
Perhaps,
one.
yeah.
better?
I'm with you
Because
on
you
that
can't judge race from the people that we're like
No.
involved with, because you hear about like racist couples all the time. Like you hear about people like that have gotten with like different races, and then after the fact they've been like, oh, I wasn't with that person. He's like this, but he's that. So you can't really judge it from relationships.
The rise of race relationships hasn't really got a direct sort of correlation to racism existing or not. I just think it's down to a number of factors, one of them being globalization, maybe.
Exactly.
Like the increase in sort of technology. The world is so like interconnected now. I mean, you can be so closely related somehow, virtually, with somebody in Taiwan, and somehow you are related, somehow you have some sort of a relationship, and I feel like because of that the world seems smaller than what it is, so we kind of rub out total expectations of race and all of that. Unfortunately, that sort of makes issues of like cultural autonomy and stuff, like you are in a country and there's no sort of like patriotism or like nationalism as much.
That's
that
another
is so
problem
closely
altogether.
linked to racism, so 'cause it's so closely linked to racism, you kind of think there's a correlation, but really and truly it's just to do with the world's just a bit more smaller, so we don't really care about
I
these
think
things
most of us
anymore.
agree with that part, that the world is like, it's turning into a boiling pot of different cultures,
Yeah,
different races
it's a melting
and stuff.
pot, isn't it?
But at what point do we stand up and say, okay, that's good progress towards ending racism? Like we can keep saying, okay, there's this, but keep saying, oh, there's still racism out there. When do you draw the line? Like, okay, we've made some significant progress.
Maybe when
That's
cops
so
start
true.
killing black kids get indicted. Or
Yeah.
Right now they're killing everyone.
I'm
They
actually,
cross the line, like. So,
And
So
then
if-
people are getting into jobs not because they're trying to fill a quota, but because of their academic skills or
Yeah.
their skills in the
Yeah.
workplace.
I would argue against both those points, actually.
Why? What would you say? Why are you arguing against that?
It's the bad position to take, but like again, I've been agreeing with most of the points here so far that racism is still deeply rooted. However, in the legal system, when you're talking about workplace and so on, it's not quite there. Like you can assume that people don't get hired. You can assume that police brutality is rampant because of certain media outlets telling you about
What do
it.
you
You
mean
see
it's
an
not there?
article.
How can you say it's not there?
Of course it is
No
there,
way.
Yes,
but
it
it's
is
there.
there.
It's
It's
there
more
to
than
a
there.
point that's not exaggerated by the media. It's there to an understandable point. Now that word understandable is where criticisms can come in.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
go
you
on.
hear about multiple cases, articles, school shootings, police brutality cases, and tiny cases of, for example, speed driving, drunk driving, and so on, whereas the police are more violent towards a certain race. However, if you start looking at the statistics specifically in the United States, you start noticing that men in general, not their skin color, not their whatever culture they're from, are pulled over more often. They go through more violent crimes. And then if you start looking at the statistics of race when it comes to specific crimes, let's say drunk driving, specifically speeding, you start noticing that there is a discrepancy. And that could account for certain,
So you say that-
I would not push it to like violence, but I'd account it to
you believe in
certain,
statistics?
that's usually a good thing. That's usually a good thing to rely on.
That's the question.
No,
Not
not really.
necessarily,
Who
because
makes
they-
up these statistics?
Exactly.
See,
And who are they
I would,
asking?
I
And
would
who
hope
are they? Who are
that
they
they
for?
don't.
Who are they for?
I would hope that these statistics aren't pulled out of where the sun doesn't
There
shine.
it is.
Well,
It's made up by somebody with an agenda.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's made up by a certain group of people that have an agenda, and that agenda has to be indoctrinated throughout society, whether it's through healthcare, education, the workplace, wherever it is. And unfortunately, it doesn't cater to everybody's classes or their races. So everybody that's the minority, unfortunately, is the people that are at the back end of it. So that's, of
I
course,
can
that's how.
again, if you can't rely on statistics, you can't rely on things like scientific discoveries. What are you really going to choose? Believe what you see, or believe perhaps people who have actually worked in the field and researched them and have peer-reviewed data instead?
But it goes back to
But a
that
lot of
point
them
what
chat
she was
rubbish, though.
saying. Yeah, it goes back to what she was saying about
Yeah.
the people that are
Actually living
conducting these like to statistics. Like, what is their aim? Because if
What
it's
is their
from
aim?
a neutral point, yes, understandable. Because you can say statistics are good, but there's going to be statistics on both sides. So how are you supposed to determine which side has got the right statistics?
I'd like to agree with you there. I'll even give an example for your point. For example, if we look back a couple decades, we noticed that there were many studies that showed smoking was entirely safe. Who were those studies backed by? Smoking-related companies. So of course, statistics and other studies can be forged. However, when peer review comes into place, when you have studies taking place in America, in Australia, and other countries, we notice that there's a distinct correlation, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's IQ. There's many things you can take into account. I'm not saying there's concrete facts, I'm just saying it's better to rely on that rather than observations or a Facebook article you might have come across, or Fox News.
Especially Fox News.
So going back to this
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
what would be, in terms of like determining if racism has disappeared, what would be like one thing you'd think, yes, this
Okay,
is
right
it?
now, okay, so top of my head, I'm going to just throw any point out there. Don't even have to really think about it too much, because I can give 101 examples I'm going to throw out there. Diversity in the workplace, does that exist, yes or no?
I'm sorry?
Diversity. Diversity within every single field
It's not just
I'm
in-
talking about.
I agree with you there, but
Well,
not just
culturally.
in the workplace, but in like the CEOs and
There you
those-
go.
that part
That's
of
what we're
the-
talking. They're the most important part.
Exactly. Up there, not just like.
Does that exist?
Diversity.
How many percentages of people are from BAME groups, so black and minority ethnic groups, but they're in the workplace? I
Again,
mean, that's an issue.
we can
again.
rely on
That's
statistics
an
to show that
effective-
you're right. You're entirely right that there is a clear discrepancy between minorities not in power positions and so
Yeah.
on. But then you have to look at why. Statistics can't tell you why, but they can help
No.
you extrapolate information from the data that's present. So one of the reasons could be there's racism. People just don't like people of other skin colors and so on. Another explanation could be merit.
Of merit. So you think merit is just. So if, for example, 8%, which is a true fact, if we're based on statistics,
I agree
8%
with you.
of black males, of judges are black. 8%.
That's horrible.
Right. So are we saying, if we're basing it on merit, that black people are necessarily not qualified or merited enough
Of
for them
course
to
not.
be in those positions? But that's merit, though, and we're statistics. So I'm actually giving you both of your own examples in one.
I'd like to point out that I'm not just saying merit is the only reason. I'm saying it's one of the reasons. Because if
Okay.
we start looking at the legal structure when it comes to hiring people, there are clear laws set in place that you are not allowed to discriminate. And there are many, I can't give you the numbers, but I'd assume at least thousands upon thousands of cases that go to court based off of discrimination or potential discrimination. So clearly we're combating that as much as possible. What else can we do to push and actually kill racism? Because again, I think everyone here at this table would agree racism does exist. But I would argue that legally, not so much.
And there's the bell. Let's see what some of our dinner guests have to say.
The food was great. I tried mostly everything on my plate. The only slight complaint I have is that it was kind of cold, but then it got better over time because as the conversation got better, the food almost started tasting better, and that was how it was. Aresh and I thought it was mostly civil, and considering we digress from the topic, I think our main differences, at least what were highlighted there, were just how statistics work, I believe, and the emphasis on agendas and so on, like backstage scenes. So it's more so I take opinions seriously when they're substantiated by facts. Other people, maybe, maybe not. But I think it's nothing that we can't get over. Perhaps it'll change in the next one. I've definitely experienced racism, but I would consider it minor racism, however you'd like to classify it. It's just more so where are you from, go back to your country and things like that. But I'm aware that racism is out there at a greater extent.
Khalid's a lovely guy. I mean, I've spoken to him previously before about a random host of topics. This particular one was probably a bit dear to my heart because it involves racism. And also he's from a different socio-economical and a different ethnic demographic than I am. So of course our opinions are going to differ. He spoke a lot about statistics, spoke a lot about statistics taking over observations, and I'm for observations. I believe you learn through life through what you see and what you hear and what you don't see and what you don't hear. So
that's probably why. I mean, I don't live in the most, I don't live in 1950s America or 1960s America, or I don't live in, in that sort of time, but we are now kind of affected by indirect racism, which is, I think, a lot more harmful than blatant racism. Reason why there's such thing as institutional racism, and that's indirect. I'm not necessarily being caned or whipped no more, but I am being told that, or not necessarily myself, but when people are being told that we can't get jobs because of, in certain arenas because of the colour of our skin or where we're from. People are being racially affected within healthcare, within schools, education, the workplace. So that's where I come from. Oh my God, the food's so good. You see those lamb ribs, right? Anyone had those lamb ribs? No? Anyone had those lamb ribs? No? Those lamb ribs were so serious. That's why the minute the camera was off, it got clotted, it got done one time. So yeah, can you tell me your dress afterwards?
Well, that was an interesting course. Lots of biting points and different views. What did you guys think about Arisha's point on workplace diversity and Kaz's thoughts on a lack of merit qualifications among Black and minority ethnic groups? Let's debate. Diversity in the workplace, does that truly exist? Yes or no, and why? Tweet us at DTWYMF Show.